My name is Isla Carter. I'm 33 years old, and nearly my entire youth was swallowed by the four walls of Carter Design and Build, the construction company my parents founded in Charlotte, North Carolina. For 11 years, I worked tirelessly from 6 a.m. until late at night, including weekends and holidays. I turned down three job offers from prestigious firms in New York right after graduating college with a double major in business management and architecture. While my friends were checking in from Bali or getting engaged in Napa Valley, I was clocking hours on construction sites, elbows deep in every design draft, contract, and technical error. I didn't do it because I was forced to. I did it because of a belief planted in me as a child. One day this company will be yours, Ela. It's your future. That was what my father, Raymond Carter, used to say when I sat beside him in meetings, a box of crayons in my lap and a project plan laid out in front of us. I believed in that promise, completely. What I gave up wasn't just time. I had once been with someone willing to move from Seattle to Charlotte just to be closer to me. But he left after I canceled 3 ski trips because of emergency client meetings. I didn't attend my best friend's wedding because it fell on the same day as the groundbreaking for a federal highway project I was overseeing. I didn't blame anyone. I thought it was all worth it. Then June came back. My sister, 2 years older than me, once the free spirit of our family, suddenly returned after nearly a decade in Europe. She had studied art history in Florence, sold paintings at weekend markets in Paris, and dated a Portuguese musician. She had never measured a foundation, never read a budget sheet, and had no idea what distinguished structural steel from hollow section beams. But my parents welcomed her like a long-lost child returned from heaven. She said she wanted to explore a new field, and within just 2 weeks, my father created a brand new title for her: Creative Brand Director. No job description, no KPIs, no deadlines. June would arrive at the office around 10 a.m. with a hand-poured latte and ideas about changing the color of safety vests to match visual trends. While I was juggling 3 delayed construction projects, she'd leave by 3 p.m. with a cheerful, "Do great things, sis." I wasn't jealous. At least not at first. I was actually happy she was back. Our family could have Sunday dinners again, something we hadn't done in years. I told myself I should open up more, try to accept our differences. I tried. I really did. But then, the avoiding glances, the meetings I was no longer invited to, the approving nods my father gave whenever June proposed yet another brand image refresh, even if no one really knew what it meant. It felt like I was slowly being pushed out of the very picture I had spent my youth painting. And I had made one critical mistake. I thought family always remembered those who sacrificed for them. I thought nothing at Carter Design and Build could shock me anymore. But one rainy Friday afternoon, while I was trying to locate a construction contract with the city for the Pine Hill Urban Redevelopment Project, my entire belief system collapsed in an instant. Thanks to June's creative overhaul of our storage system, everything was chaos. To find the contract, I had to rifle through every drawer, and in one labeled faintly "Internal Confidential," I found a thick folder, neatly clipped and labeled Ownership Transfer, Carter D&B. I was about to set it aside, but the date on the label, March of this year, just a few months ago, stopped my heart. Curiosity turned to suspicion, and then to a deep, physical ache as I opened the first page. Transfer of 75% company ownership to June Alexandra Carter, remaining 25% retained by Raymond and Karen Carter. Not a single mention of me. Not one word. I flipped through each page with trembling hands, hoping it was some kind of mistake. But no, everything had been prepared by the Hayden and Brooks law firm, notarized and signed by my parents. And June, March, Right when I was managing the launch phase of the Midtown Green Hub project, juggling 3 active builds and pulling all-nighters because our project management software had crashed. They signed over the company to her then. While I was still trusting them. I stood up so quickly I nearly knocked over the chair, the folder clutched to my chest just as Elise, our operations manager, walked in. She looked at me like she knew exactly what I was holding. "Are you okay?" she asked, her voice tentative. I held up the folder, no longer trying to hide anything. How many people at the company knew about this? Elise looked away. Pretty much all of upper management. June asked us to keep it quiet from the technical and operations teams. She said your parents would announce it when the time was right. I didn't say anything. I couldn't. My throat tightened. Turns out everyone knew, except me, the one who had poured sweat, blood and tears into running this company for over a decade. I left the office without remembering what I said, or if I said anything at all. All I knew was that I was clutching that folder to my chest like it was a fresh wound, ripped wide open. I didn't go home. I drove around aimlessly in the rain, not knowing where I was heading, vision blurred with water. At every red light, I stared at the folder on the passenger seat, as if it would suddenly open and explain everything. They had kept this from me. Not for a few days, not for a few weeks, but for over 3 months. I remembered that meeting at the beginning of April, when I presented my plan to streamline the order processing system, something that would save nearly 12% in labor costs annually. June interrupted me to talk about renaming the company to make it shorter and trendier. At the time, my father just nodded and said, "That's a proposal worth serious consideration." Now I understood. They didn't need my input anymore, because the decision had already been made. That night, I didn't sleep. I couldn't. I sat in my small apartment all night, the cold yellow light reflecting off the table where I laid the folder, as if it were staring back at me, daring me to deny the truth. I thought about all the times my dad said, "You're the backbone," and my mom holding my hand saying, "You're the one holding this company together." June, casually pouring wine at parties, talking about a rebranding campaign she never detailed. And me, still throwing myself into work, believing I was building a future for myself. The feeling of betrayal wasn't just pain, it was humiliation. I couldn't understand how they could do this. No conversation, no warning, just a piece of paper and some signatures. And the worst part? They never planned to tell me. That Sunday, I went to my parents' house with a completely different mindset. Not as a daughter coming for family dinner, but as a woman carrying a truth too big to swallow. Dinner was still held at the red brick 2-story house in Myers Park, where I grew up, a place filled with childhood memories and shattered illusions. The door opened, and the familiar scent of meat pie and lavender greeted me, just like always. My mom, Karen, greeted me cheerfully. "Isla, right on time. I made your favorite ribs tonight." I gave a mechanical smile and said nothing. Inside, my father, Raymond, was sitting in the living room reading the paper. He glanced up at me for a second, then returned to the financial section like it was just another evening. June was in the kitchen, wearing a white apron with navy trim, arranging salad on a platter. She looked at me with a soft smile. No trace of someone who had signed away the company just a few months ago. I wondered, was that smile shy, clueless, or fully aware? I sat down at the table, quietly observing. For the first 15 minutes, everything played out like a familiar script. Mom asked about the weather, June talked about redesigning the brochures, Dad nodded along and added comments like, "That's a pretty modern idea." I couldn't swallow a single bite. All I wanted was to end this charade. I placed my napkin down, reached into my purse, pulled out the copied ownership transfer folder, and laid it right in the center of the table. All 3 of them froze. June was the first to speak, her voice softer than usual. "Isla, where did you get that?" I looked straight into my father's eyes. From a place you thought I'd never check. Unfortunately, I did. No one said anything for a few seconds. My mom let out a small sigh, gently set her fork down like even the sound might break the silence. My father finally spoke, his tone low and professional. We were planning to tell you, Isla, it just wasn't the right time yet. I laughed. An empty laugh, not angry, not amused, just raw. Dad, do you know how many hours I've worked every week over the past 10 years? I've been on job sites until 2 a.m. just to make sure the foundation wasn't off by an inch. And you? Signed away 75% of the company to someone who just came back from Portugal? June flushed, lips pressed tightly together. I was laughing. I didn't mean. I cut her off. Didn't mean what? Didn't know or didn't care? My father lightly slapped his hand on the table. It's enough. This was a strategic decision, not a personal one. June brings a fresh perspective, creativity, something the construction industry desperately needs to survive in the digital age. You're great at operations, but a company can't run on coordination alone. It needs vision. I stood up, my voice calm, almost chilling. Well, if I'm so good at operations, then I'm done operating. My mother leaned forward. Amy, Isla, don't say that. You can't just walk away. There are so many projects waiting. Then let the new CEO handle them, I said sharply. June owns 75% of the company now. That should be more than enough to manage everything, including the Winton contract that's running behind schedule, or the missing fire safety line items in the Lake Hill housing bid. June looked panicked, turning to her parents. Dad, Mom, I don't have the expertise to handle all of that. Isla's the one who... I picked up my bag, voice barely above a whisper but cutting through the room like glass. I'll be submitting my formal resignation on Monday, and just to be clear, I'm not the one walking away from this family. You crossed me off your list a long time ago. I turned and walked out, not waiting for anyone to stop me. As I stepped through the door, I wasn't angry anymore. There was only a hollow space inside. Like standing before the unfinished blueprint of a dream building, suddenly realizing no one ever intended to build it for you. I got home a little after 9 p.m. I didn't turn on the lights. I didn't check emails. Just sat on the sofa, listening to the rain tapping against the windows. For the first time in 11 years, I didn't have to wake up early on Monday. And I wasn't sure whether that was a relief or a tragedy. On that first Monday morning not owned by Carter Design and Build, I woke up at 7:15, almost 2 hours later than usual. But instead of jumping out of bed in a panic, I lay there, listening to the wind rustling through the curtains. No meetings. No reports waiting for signatures. No urgent emails from my dad. No last-minute design errors to fix. No budget revisions to redo before a bid submission. Just me. And a vast empty space I hadn't yet figured out how to fill. By noon, I got my first call. Isla, this is Craig Foster from Redwood Engineering. I heard you left Carter. Is it true? Redwood was one of the biggest MEP contractors in the South. We'd worked together on the Midtown Riverline project. They'd always valued my crisis management skills. That's right, Craig. I officially left this weekend. He hesitated for a moment before continuing. We're planning to expand into civil projects. Any chance you'd consider working with us? With real authority, of course. Not just a team lead in name like you were at Carter. I smiled, thanked him, and said I'd think about it. I wasn't in a rush. But an hour later, the phone rang again. This time, it was Sarah Benson, Senior Financial Manager at Marwood Urban Projects, a client that made up nearly 30% of Carter Design and Build's annual revenue. Isla, I know what happened over the weekend couldn't have been easy, but I need to be honest, we're extremely concerned. June just sent over a Phase 2 timeline for the project, completely missing all technical specs. No drawings attached, no budget breakdown, no approval schedule. We can't sign off on anything done that way. I sighed. The irony of no longer being an employee of Carter, yet being pulled in to clean up their mess, wasn't lost on me. You'll need to contact the executive office directly. I'm no longer with the company. Sarah hesitated. I know. But I also know if you're considering signing with another firm, they might end up getting our entire account. And if that happens, please call me. After hanging up, I sat still for a few seconds. For the first time in over a decade, my worth, my real worth, not just my role as my father's shadow, was being acknowledged. For the next 3 days, I began rewriting my life from a blank slate. I signed up for a Tuesday morning yoga class, the first time I'd stepped into a studio without a laptop in my bag. I had coffee with Talia Gomez, an old college friend, now a career strategist. I don't know who I am without Carter, I admitted. She looked at me for a moment, then said, "Maybe that's the best thing that's ever happened to you." I reopened my resume, something I hadn't touched since I was 23. As I wrote each line, I didn't mention the company name. Instead, I listed restructured project management systems for 7 concurrent builds, led negotiations for 16 contracts totaling over $95 million, maintained schedule overruns below 3% for 5 consecutive years. I sent that resume to one company only, Stratford Design Consortium, Carter's direct regional competitor. They had approached me multiple times in the past, but I had always declined out of loyalty. That afternoon, Stratford's director of human resources, Calvin West, called me. "Isla Carter? We practically had a calendar alert set for the day you left Carter." I laughed, really laughed for the first time in what felt like forever. "We're ready to offer you the position of Director of Project Operations, at 1.5 times your current salary, with equity sharing after 12 months, and full authority to build your own technical team." I was silent. "Don't answer yet," he continued. "I know you'll want time to think. But I also know they'll call you back. And next time, it might be to beg you to save what should have been yours to begin with." And as if the universe were confirming his words, the very next morning, my phone rang. On the screen was a name I never expected to see again. My father. Raymond Carter. I stared at the screen. My heart slowed. I knew right then the storm they created was beginning to spin back toward them. And this time, I wouldn't be the one losing. My father's first call since I resigned came at exactly 7 a.m. on Thursday, not even a full week after that fateful dinner. "Hey, and Isla, I need to see you. It's urgent." No greeting, no "how are you," not a single word about the betrayal of a decade's worth of loyalty, just that familiar voice, for the first time, no longer steady. I agreed to meet, not to forgive, but because I wanted to see how far they'd fall without me. We met at a quiet cafe near the South End Business District. He arrived 10 minutes early. His coffee was untouched, eyes fixed on the door like he was awaiting judgment. "Thank you for coming," he said as I pulled out my chair. I said nothing, set my bag down, sat upright. For the first time in my life, I sat across from him not as a daughter, but as an equal. He didn't waste time. "Clients are losing trust. Marwood's threatening to pull out of the Greenbelt project. Redwood is refusing to release the advance unless you sign off." I tilted my head slightly. "And how is that my problem?" His face tightened. Fingers interlocked as if restraining the anger he used to control me. "We need you back as Chief Operating Officer, full authority over projects, reporting directly to me and June." I let out a laugh, quiet but cutting. "You mean come back to clean up a mess I didn't make, with a fancy title but still just a worker under the official shareholder?" He didn't answer. His eyes met mine, and in them was something, not remorse, but definitely fear. "I'm in talks with Stratford," I said. "They're offering the same position with profit sharing, 6 weeks of paid leave a year, and no one named June in my reporting chain." He frowned. "You can't be serious about Stratford. They're direct competition." I shrugged. You should have thought about that before signing the company over to someone who can't run it. Silence hung between us for a few moments. What do you want? He asked, voice lower, weaker. No longer that of a father instructing, but of a negotiator on the back foot. I leaned back and gently placed a USB drive on the table. I've compiled everything: strategic client lists, the risk management framework I developed, the growth roadmap for Phase 3, the only things keeping Carter Design and Build alive these past 3 years. He looked at it like he was staring at a lifeline. I won't hand this over unless 3 conditions are met. 1% of the company's shares, legally transferred. 2. An official seat on the board of directors. 3. A capped work schedule, no more than 45 hours per week and 4 weeks of paid vacation per year. That's impossible, he responded immediately. June already holds 75% of the shares. You can't force her to sell. No need for June to sell, I cut in. You and Mom hold 25%. Transfer 15% to me. As for June's 25%, if she wants to keep the company afloat, she should willingly give up at least 10%. He sighed, his gaze seeming to search through me for the good daughter who once sat beside him in meetings when I was just 16. But that girl was gone. She was buried the day he secretly signed that transfer document back in March. I stood up and paid for both our coffees. You have 48 hours. After that, I'm signing with Stratford. I walked out without looking back. The next day, my mother called, her voice shaky. Sweetheart, can you come for dinner? We need to talk, as a family. I declined. If there's something to discuss, put it on the calendar. I don't do negotiation dinners anymore. An hour later, June texted. I slough, I'm sorry. Can you give me a chance to explain? I didn't respond. At this point, I didn't need apologies. I needed real change. At exactly 6 p.m. on Monday, my father called again. We agree to your terms. Harold, the family attorney, is preparing the paperwork. Can you meet tomorrow morning? I ended the call and closed my eyes for a long moment. Not because I had just won a power play, but because, for the first time, I didn't have to beg to be seen. I had flipped the board, and this time, I was the one moving the pieces. Tuesday, 11:50 am. I walked into the private conference room on the 5th floor of Jennings and Rowe Law, downtown Charlotte. The room was bright, with a nearly 13-foot walnut table, black leather chairs, and a sleek espresso machine in the corner. But none of that mattered to me. My focus was entirely on the 4 people already seated inside. My father, Raymond Carter, was checking his phone but glanced up the moment he saw me. My mother, Karen, offered a faint, hopeful smile. June looked pale, her hair tied back tighter than usual, fingers interlocked as if to steady herself. And finally, there was Harold Penley, our family's attorney for over 30 years, holding a thick folder in front of him. I took a seat, my gaze steady and unflinching. If this was the final round, I had arrived with the upper hand. Harold began. Before we go into the details, June has something she'd like to say. I turned to her. She took a deep breath. Ella, I'm sorry. Those 3 words echoed in the quiet room like someone had dropped a stone into still water. Since you left, everything has spiraled. I tried my best, but I don't have the operational skills. The cost projections you made, the timelines you built, all of it was beyond me. I said nothing. June's eyes welled up. I thought I could learn gradually, but I had no idea how much of the company's survival depended on you, and I know now that me holding 75% was never fair. No one spoke. I looked at Harold and nodded. He opened the folder and slid a printed document across the table to me. Based on yesterday's preliminary agreement, here's the revised structure. June will transfer 35% of her shares to Isla, retaining 40%. The remaining 25% held by Raymond and Karen remains unchanged. Isla's shares will come with a board seat and mandatory approval rights for all strategic decisions. I skimmed the document. Concise, accurate, not a trace of the vague language they once used. Harold continued, "Official rules will be as follows. Isla Carter, Chief Executive Officer with full authority over operations, administration, and finances. June Carter, Creative and Client Development Director, focused on brand image and partnerships. All executive roles will adhere to work boundaries, no more than 45 hours per week, and a minimum of 3 weeks of vacation per year." I nodded. "Is there a clause about future share changes?" Harold replied, "Yes. Any transfer must be approved by at least 2 of the 3 ownership parties, Isla, June, or your parents." I glanced at my father. He didn't say anything, but the sharpness in his eyes was gone. Maybe he finally saw the truth, that I was no longer the easily managed daughter, but the person he needed. I signed. No shaking hand, no hesitation. June signed after me, then our parents. When my father's pen touched the paper, I didn't feel triumphant. I just felt right. After all those years living under the shadow of "your time will come," power no longer came from promises. It came from action. The meeting ended. As I stood to leave, June called out, "Isla, can we talk in private?" I hesitated, then nodded. We stepped out onto the 5th-floor balcony where the soft sunlight lit up rows of hanging orchid pots. "I never meant to take everything," she said quietly. "Dad told me. You didn't care about ownership, just running things. And I believed him." I stayed silent. I didn't want to be CEO. I love art, strategy. But I don't know operations, and I never wanted to ruin what you built. I turned to her. "You should have said that sooner." June looked down. "I know, but if I could do it again, I'd choose differently." Part of me wanted to dismiss her words, but another part understood. Sometimes, family doesn't betray you out of malice, but out of weakness at the worst moment. I exhaled, lighter than I'd felt in a long time. "We'll start over, but this time, clear steps, clear boundaries." June nodded, eyes misty but no longer afraid. As I walked out through the lobby, I knew I hadn't just signed a legal document. I had signed the beginning of something entirely mine. 1 month after the new ownership agreement, I stepped into my new office on the 6th floor of Carter Design and Build. Not my father's old office with the oil painting and heavy wood desk, but a bright, open space with a round conference table and flexible work zones, just like how I wanted to lead, clear, collaborative, and without power silos. The company began finding its rhythm again. Marwood Urban Projects confirmed they'd stick with us after I personally sent them a revised proposal. Clean, data-backed, and with a risk forecast included. Redwood Engineering also returned, on the condition that I would be the final signatory for invoices. That made me laugh. They didn't ask for Carter, they asked for me. Internal operations shifted too. I restructured the workflow model, drawing distinct lines between the technical, finance, and creative departments. June, though still clumsy with project software, proved excellent at client presentations. Her design renders helped us secure 2 upscale residential projects in the Lakeview district, all within a month. I didn't say it out loud, but it was clear. When someone is placed in the right role, they shine in their own way. Company culture transformed too. No more emails at 2 a.m., no more unspoken pressure to stay late as proof of loyalty. I set boundaries. No meetings after 4:30 p.m. Fridays were designated no internal email days, and each employee had a white week, 1 week with no meetings to focus on deep work. One afternoon, Eli, the head of engineering, stepped into my office with a smoothie. "You know what? Last night I made it home before my daughter went to sleep, for the first time in 2 years." I smiled, eyes stinging a little. That was why I came back. Not for prestige, but to build the kind of workplace I used to dream about. In my personal life, for the first time in 11 years, I booked a vacation without packing a laptop. 1 week on the Oregon coast, reading thrillers and learning how to slow down. I hadn't realized how much I needed that. I also joined a Wednesday night book club at a small cafe near my house. That's where I met Lucas Rivera, a soft-spoken environmental engineer with a deep voice and a quirky love for collecting old bookmarks. He was the first person who didn't ask me about the company, but instead asked, "What book changed the way you see yourself?" I told him The Midnight Library, and he nodded like he truly understood. We're on our third date now. No rush, no pressure, just two adults learning to listen without racing to the ending. And my family? At first, I hesitated to return to Sunday dinners. But then one day, June sent me a photo of the dining table with 2 bottles of wine, one for Mom, one for me, and a caption that read, "No battles tonight. You can just come eat." I showed up, and I stayed longer than I thought I would. My father was quieter now, no longer commanding. My mother still cooked too much food but stopped asking about the company. June and I, for the first time, spoke without competition, without hiding. Once, after helping me revise a marketing email, she turned to me and said, "I used to be terrified of you. You were always certain, always right." And I just colored in the spaces other people had drawn. I shook my head. "No one wants to live inside someone else's blueprint forever, June. Now you're creating one of your own." She smiled. "A real one." Eventually, I realized being pushed out of Carter Design and Build wasn't the end. It was the beginning of a more evolved version of myself. A woman who no longer defines herself by her meeting schedule, by deadlines, or by her parents' expectations, but by the real value she creates in work, in relationships, and in her own life. And if someone asked me, was it worth it to stand up and set terms with your own family? I would smile and say, yes, because if you don't know your own worth, don't expect anyone else to. One Saturday morning at the end of the month, I sat on the balcony of my small apartment in South End, holding a cup of hot coffee, watching the first rays of sunlight glint off the rooftops of old brick buildings. Down on the street, life was waking up. Someone walking their dog, a cyclist breezing past, the smell of pastries drifting from the bakery on the corner. I sat there, alone, but not lonely. It had been 3 months since I walked into that boardroom and completely shifted the power balance of the company that bore my name. 3 months since I reclaimed not just shares, but my voice, my respect, and more than anything, the right to own my life. Carter Design and Build was no longer a place that suffocated me with expectations or prejudice. It was a place I now led with clarity and compassion. Not to prove anything to my father or my sister, but to create a workplace that, if I were 23 again, I'd choose to join. Freely. I no longer woke up dreading delayed project plans or the watchful eyes of relatives. I woke up asking, how will I live today in a way that's true to myself? And the answer, each day, became easier. I went on weekend dates with Lucas, sometimes just to browse the farmer's market or read books in the park together. Neither of us had to hide our ambitions or schedules, and neither had to shrink parts of ourselves to be accepted. My mother now called not to ask, "What did you get done at work?" but, "Did you sleep enough?" My father no longer dominated board meetings. He stepped back into a true advisory role, sometimes sharp with insights, but also listening when I set direction. And June, she became my most reliable partner in client meetings. Sometimes I teased her. "You used to paint with watercolor, now you paint contracts with words." We'd found a way to stop competing and start collaborating. But the biggest thing I learned through it all wasn't about share percentages, job titles, or saving a company. It was in the moment I realized I had always held value, even when others didn't see it. And that you don't need permission from others to start choosing yourself again. If you've listened this far, I want to ask you something. What would you do if you were in my position? If one day the people you trusted most made you feel small, dismissed, or pushed to the side? Would you have the courage to stand up, to set boundaries, to walk away, or come back, but as a stronger version of yourself? I won't say the path is easy. There were nights I cried in the dark, not blaming anyone, just utterly heartbroken by those I thought would always protect me. And there were mornings I walked out the door in a new coat, hair tied high, heart steadier than ever, because I knew I deserved to choose, to decide, and to live fully as myself. Sometimes, the hardest people to confront aren't your bosses or society, it's your family. But when you dare to face them, to redraw the lines, to say, I don't accept this anymore, something powerful happens. You don't just change your relationship with them, you change your relationship with yourself. If this story resonates with you, if you've ever struggled to be heard or respected within your own family, I invite you to share your thoughts in the comments. Have you ever been underestimated while carrying the weight of everything? Have you stayed quiet to keep the peace and now wonder if it's time to speak up? I'll be reading every comment because maybe you're standing at the very same crossroads I once did, between giving up and starting something entirely new. And if you want to hear more stories of courage, justice, and reclaiming your self-worth, hit like, subscribe, and turn on notifications. Because I believe one story at the right time can change how you see yourself. Thank you for listening to my journey. And don't forget, knowing your worth isn't selfish. It's essential. Follow this channel to catch more heartfelt family stories. Coming soon.